Hi guys, welcome back. This is Match Chat number 90, featuring part 2 of what will be 3 interviews with industry legend Brian Fargo. Now in this episode, I want to focus on Wasteland, a game that I and many others consider to be one of the greatest computer role-playing games of all time. We'll also talk about Fallout 1 and 2, Fallout 3, and a few other games, and modern CRPGs in general. So a lot of great material. Stay tuned. Got a lot to cover here, so without further ado, here is Mr. Brian Fargo.
All right, so Wasteland. Now that's definitely a game that I think anybody who likes role-playing games is familiar with. It's definitely a cult classic. What can we say? So I want to know what's the story behind that game, and why do you think it is that setting or that sort of post-apocalyptic thing resonates with so many different kinds of gamers?
Well, a couple different things. One of the things that I think that made Wasteland, so special at the time, and a lot of why people still have a very positive memory of it, is that it, in a way, it was the first sandbox game, right? It was an open world, do anything you want, any order you want, and so you'd get ripple effects that could happen within 1 minute later or 30 minutes later, which is a lot what Grant GTA in a way was the sandbox game, right? And so that open nature of it was fairly unique. There were other games, Ultima games were open, but things tended to be very compartmentalized. They weren't as rippling like this was, and then also kind of the moral ambiguity of it all made it so interesting, right? I mean, that was very much what we riffed off when we did Fallout. I mean, when we did the vision document for Fallout, 6 out of 10 things were right out of Wasteland. I mean, it was bang, they were right there. I mean, as people have heard before, the only reason there is a Fallout is because I didn't have the rights to do a Wasteland 2. And so anyway, so that was the innovative stuff with Wasteland. And then in terms of so it was also the post-apocalyptic. It was something people could kind of grasp. It was something that people would talk about could actually happen. I think sometimes with sci-fi, I don't really think I'm going to be flying around in a spaceship anytime soon. But this kind of stuff kind of feels it's gritty, and I think it's that gritty realism. And again, you can really get that kind of moral ambiguity, or women in wheelchairs with grenades. It was crazy stuff in the game, right? And it just it really worked. And then the writing was great. It was Michael Stackpole and Ken St. Andre and Liz Danforth and I think Marco Green. A lot of things people have forgotten is that game took almost 5 years to do. Wasteland was a huge game because every square was a program. And so to make each one, and again, the rippling effect and everything else, it was a lot of time. So that was a big effort.
Now, you had mentioned that you weren't able to get the rights to do, I guess you have them now, Wasteland 2. There was some type of legal issue with that. So I was sort of curious how Wasteland 2 would have been different than Fallout.
That's a good question. I haven't really thought a lot about that. I think that I'm kind of designing it in my head right now as I'm thinking about that answer, because it really wasn't an option, right? I think that the party-based nature and the way the AIs worked in Wasteland would have been brought to the forefront a little bit more. I found myself in Wasteland spending more time kind of managing my NPC party in a way of them, blowing clips and me getting upset with them and things like that were a little bit different. So they probably would have been played up. I think the party-based nature of it would have been played up a little bit more. The personality of the player would be the biggest thing. Another thing people might not remember is that Fallout was originally going to be based upon the Steve Jackson's GURPS sort of rule book, and one of the world, I forget which one they were exactly, and we ended up getting off that because Steve was not. He was sort of offended by the nature of the content and where it was going, and I had strong opinions about the sensibilities for what Fallout should be, so I'd rather have dropped. So we dropped out of the Steve Jackson deal and just created our own system.
He thought it was a little too violent, if I am correct about that.
Yeah. He was. I remember he saw the opening what is most people consider to be one of the best
Hmm.
opening cinematics of all time, which was that with the ink spots, or what do you say, that soft music played with a violent backdrop. And he said he just wouldn't approve it. And I said, well, if you don't like that, you ain't seen nothing yet. So that was kind of the beginning of the end.
Okay, so let's briefly wanted to talk about a Stonekeep. Another game I think is very interesting. This was in 1995. And I was just talking to one of my friends about this game, and we don't really know what to make of it. I mean, it seems like on the one hand, the graphics are very, top of the line, top notch, but people were complaining, I guess, about the game engine, or it seemed outdated somehow. I mean, what's going on with the Stonekeep?
Yeah, another epic of ours, another nearly 5-year epic. Boy, you can't fault us for not trying to be ambitious. That's for sure. I mean, we were always with Interplay trying to be on the cutting edge of stuff, right? And that was a product that if it had just gotten out probably a year earlier, maybe a year and a half, we probably really would have nailed it. But the problem is so much time had passed by during the development. And the biggest thing being that by the time it came out, the other sort of Dungeness, whether it's Ultima Underworld, I think, I'm not sure, you could look up, down, left, right, and scroll around like a Doom, like a shooter, right? And that isn't how we started. We thought we're going to go for a graphic fidelity. We're going to lock the camera in place, but it's going to look beautiful. But by the time we came out, those other ones that allowed you to scroll and look any direction, that had become the de facto standard. And so right away, we were in the hole coming out of the chute, So that hurt us a lot, because with Stonekeep, there was a lot of personality to that. I mean, there was singing, and there was great puzzles, and there was a lot of depth. And I think that we tried to. It's funny because oftentimes when me and others have tried to lighten the front end so it isn't quite so heavy and hardcore so that new users can get in, it tends to bite you in the butt. I mean, it's like you're better let them create the character, let them get down and dirty right out of the chute. And so I think we lighten up that front end, and so maybe the the hardcore crowd that it's not hardcore enough for me. Truthfully, a ton of gameplay there, just a ton, a lot of depth and stuff. But so I think with those two things probably threw that off. Now I feel like people now look back at it and go, "What a classic," But it's sort of in a retrospective way, and that it was suffering from kind of that front end, and then the comparison to the kind of the Ultima Underworld type product.
It seems like the game Doom probably had a lot to do with the negative reception.
It did absolutely. Like I said, we just because there was no Doom, when we started the development of that game, but there was there was after that.
I wanted to talk to you about all of the various licensed games you have done, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, and so on. I was just wondering what you thought in general. What are the challenges of doing a licensed game? A lot of people think, hey, it's a licensed game, it must be crap, and there's so much crappy licensed games.
Yeah.
So why is that, and how were you able to buck that trend?
Mm, well, let's see. I guess a couple things. It wasn't as bad back then it is now in terms of it's a licensed game, it must be crap, right? Because there wasn't as much of that going on. There was a little bit of that stigma, but not as much. But I remember when we did Star Trek, it was a dead license. Like when we picked it up, I think it was like 25 years old, whatever it was, right? And people were like, they were not excited about that as a product. But we did that first adventure game, and we did a smooth interface, and we really kind of nailed the sensibilities of Star Trek, and it was a big hit, and everybody loved it. So I think with any license, it's about you got to nail it, right? I mean, you got to nail it for the audience for what it is, and you can make something that isn't exactly hot. You could still make it interesting. You think of even in the films, they could look like Shrek, right? I heard Shrek was like a children's book or something. I'd never heard of it before, but they did that movie and they nailed Shrek, and it was a great film, right? So we have that same responsibility to try to nail stuff. But in general, there's always a debate about games to movies and movies to games, and I try to look at it like, would this product stand by itself without it? And if it could, then it's probably the right thing to be doing. If it couldn't stand alone without the intellectual property attached, then probably not a great idea.
Now, as a producer and a designer, would you prefer to work on a licensed title, or would you rather have a totally original property?
Um, I don't know if I have an affinity towards one or the other. It depends, right? I mean, if you said, "Hey, Brian, how'd you like to do, be the only guy doing Star Wars games, right? You'd be very excited about that, or Lord of the Rings, or whatever." I mean, they're a little, they've been fairly played out recently, but in general, so it really depends what they are. We creatively we like creating our own universes. I mean, like with the Bard's Tale remake we did, there was a lot of work and study put into recreating that universe. A lot of depth there, but it's on Scottish mythology and Celtic stuff, and there was a lot to it. On the other hand, launching a new franchise these days is very difficult. It's more difficult than it's ever been, and there's a lot of hurdles to getting a new franchise out there because there's already enough, and so I have to kind of think market conditions too as I kind of answer questions like that.
I want to get your perspective on modern RPGs. I'm a big fan of the classics like Bard's Tale and the original Fallout and all these kind of games. And,
Right,
I'm always disappointed. It just seems like I can't get my fix anymore.
right,
I
right.
thought I would start. Just want to hear what you think about Fallout 3. Some of the fans of the original games were pretty pissed off about it. Others thought it was fine. Timothy Kane, I talked to him, and
Hmm.
he thought it was fine. I'm just wondering, do you
Yeah.
think it's a great groundbreaking game, just as good as a 1 and 2?
Well, I think they did an excellent job. I mean, look, everything's about trade-offs. No matter what you do, you make a trade-off in development. And so, those first two games, they weren't console products, right? I mean, they were PC games, and the interface and the way you attack console is different than PC. You're not going to bring the exact PC experience across. You'll make this very vocal minority extremely happy, but you kind of ruin the sales, right? So, I think we could all nitpick, for what it is, and I probably would have done an edgier product, but I can't criticize anything they've done. They did a nice job with it, and it's been a huge success, and it certainly has outsold, the first two combined times whatever, So I didn't have a big problem with what they did. I think they did a respectable job. They had a great mythos to start from, with the Pit Boy and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of 50s, retro sort of look. And so, that was the beauty of it. There was so much there to kind of go from. Yeah, I think they deserve all the credit on that.
I wanted to read a quotation that I got from one of your previous interviews that I thought was interesting. It was in the context of making another Bard's Tale or Fallout game, and why that wouldn't be successful today. But anyway, the quote is, quote, "We can't deliver an 80s game experience. Nobody wants that in a modern title. So we're trying to take the best of past games, things that people understand and are comfortable with, and mix it with some new experiences." I mean, I think, I really I'd love an 80s experience.
Yeah.
So why did you say that? I mean, what's your thought behind this?
Well, I mean, well, it's interesting. So we go out, we do press tours for like Hunted and things like that, and there's the group of people that play and buy these games now. The great preponderance of them, and in fact, so a lot of the interviewers we're talking with, they've never heard of Interplay. They've never heard of Baldur's Gate. Never heard of it. Okay, so you have to recognize, so it's funny. You think I go in and I have a long, track history of stuff, and I was doing a press tour in Europe last year, and the guy says, "What have you done before?" He has no idea who I am, right? So I go, like Wasteland, Battle Chess, blah blah blah. I start going through all Descent, all the titles, and he's looking at me like I'm completely lying, like I'm just making it up, right? And he's like nodding. You could just see his eyes rolling over. So of course the whole running joke of the rest of the press tour was like, and then I invented Pong. So I have to keep that in mind. If I'm not thinking about the marketplace and just what I want to play, right? Then, which is, I love the '80s games too. Trust me, right? But if I'm not thinking about the marketplace mixed with that, then I won't be able to make games anymore. I can't survive on just the small group. So what I try to do is bring some of that stuff forward so that at least, the old school guys will kind of give them a nod towards, where we've all come from, but without putting myself in a box such that I can't have any commercial success and thus not be able to make games anymore. And so that's why I answer it that way, you know. And even with Hunted the Demons Forge, we have like a bunch of old school puzzle solving and things like that, you know. That now it's an action game, right? So if you hate action games, you know, you know what am I going to say, right? But get past it. We try to layer it on, make it so it's not too hard. You know, we do all sorts of things to make it interesting, but we put those old school elements in, and then some new players who have never had to deal with any of this type of stuff before, well, they'll think it's very innovative, you know, but meanwhile you'll look and go, we've been doing that for 20 years.
You know, it just seems like some of the old school stuff that I really liked. I love the turn-based combat. You know, I loved being able to create an entire party of characters. I mean, why are those two things in particular just so rare nowadays?
Those shouldn't. Those shouldn't. I mean, I think that's something that could be relooked at. You know, I think those are elements that should be relooked at. I definitely like the whole party based and, you know, be able to turn base if, you know, sort of option sort of thing. So don't disagree.
And that's all for this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Be back next time with the third and final part of my interview with Mr. Fargo. A lot of great content coming up. I know you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned. I also want to thank everybody who's been donating and contributing to the show. Been able to keep my drinking horn filled with some very nice beverages. As a matter of fact, I thought I would tell you, after I'm done recording, I'll be toasting you with some Little Jizz beer. This is from Wisconsin. I've got the Hefeweizen. That's pretty funny. And the Hop Nest Monster. Some really great beers for my rather excellent drinking horn. And I'll be toasting you as I enjoy those. As I am wont to do, I thought I would leave you with a quotation, this time from an American sociologist. It's a really great quote. An artist can never fail. It is a success to be one. Thought that was a great quote. So whatever your art form may be, stay true to it, and don't be swayed from your artistic choices by mere financial considerations. See you guys next week.